I wanted to essentially spend a couple of minutes on this idea of emerging technologies, starting with artificial intelligence. And today we are talking about transfer of technology in the context of artificial intelligence, but we can also talk about synthetic biology, quantum technology. New technology will always emerge. So how do you go about transferring that technology, knowing technology is actually many things? You know, it's about training opportunities, it's about information data. Well, first of all, we need to identify what are the many dimensions of impact of technology. They can affect the individual, the society. They can affect the way in which society is organized, the social life. They can affect geopolitics. Think about the current debate on who's going to take the lead on AI. Is it going to be India? Is it going to be China? Is it going to be the USA? And maybe it will be someone else. It's about the dimension of environmental impacts of technologies. It's about what goes into the technology. For example, the current inputs into artificial intelligence models is based on data which can be found in the current on the internet. But that data does not benefit from any quality assurance, quality control. So let's take one of those dimensions of impact, society. Let's think about artificial intelligence and its impact for society. And in that context, from the dimension of impact, you go down to the next level, which is criteria. So what are the societal values of artificial intelligence? What is the impact of artificial intelligence on social interactions, on health, on cultural expressions, on public education, on the possibility that artificial intelligence may actually present to us realities in a way which is distorted. And again, you go even more in details, in the sense that you determine questions. For example, does artificial intelligence, is it going to enable normalization of ideas which until now have been considered anti-social? Or is there going to be an effects on meaningful human contacts, including emotional relationships, and so on? So basically, my presentation was very short because I really wanted to stress the fact that on the one hand, we should not panic about new technology, but on the other hand, we should not undermine potential risks. So it's very important that we assess dimensions of impact of technology, positive and negative, in a way which is systematic, which is scientific, which is not overly personalized. And here I would like to finish with an example, which is the example of technology transfer in relation to the Montreal Protocol on ozone depletion. Stay with me for a little story. Before most of the audience was born, I can see there are many young people in the room. We were confronted in the 80s, I myself was relatively young, with a problem, an environmental problem, the so-called ozone hole. That is a depletion in the ozone layer, in the outer atmosphere. And that was considered to be an incredible risk for health, for the health of the planet, for the health of the people, for the health of ecosystems. So, from a technology transfer perspective, what happened in the broader sense of how I described it? First of all, the scientific evidence around the ozone hole problem was very mature. So we had scientific evidence. Secondly, because the main cause of reduction in the ozone layer was a class of chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, which are utilized, for example, in the fridges, to actually freeze food and other materials. There were alternative technologies available, essentially chemical compounds which would not have an impact on the ozone layer. So the science of the ozone hole was mature. The evidence was present. Alternative technologies were available. Markets, the private companies were interested in those alternative technologies because A, they were not going to lose any money by changing, shifting to the new chemicals, which did not have a negative and adverse impact on the ozone layer, and B, because the private sector got very excited about the possibility of new markets around those alternative chemicals. Based on that, politicians, governments took an interest in a possible protocol, an international treaty on ozone depletion to counteract ozone depletion because the science was mature. The private sector was ready to essentially transfer the technology. The public, remember, is composed by people who vote the politicians, who wanted governments to act. And therefore, the governments of the whole world were able to negotiate a treaty in a record time of 18 months and even to create a multi-billion fund to actually fund the transfer of that technology. 35 years later, we are in a situation whereby it's one of the few good stories when it comes to the planet, our planet. The ozone layer has recovered. The ozone hole is almost gone. So that is to say that when all the ingredients to bake the cake, if I can use that metaphor, are there, then technology transfer in the broader sense of the term, as I just presented, can happen. And that will also apply to AI, but we are not yet there. Thank you very much.